When you mess with a man's tractor in a small town, you're not just stealing machinery, you're pulling the pin on a grenade. And that's exactly what Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of our HOA, did one Tuesday morning that started off quiet but ended in fireworks. I live in a modest home on the edge of our subdivision. Technically, I'm outside the official HOA boundary by maybe 30 feet. That small detail has caused big problems over the years, mostly because Karen refuses to acknowledge it. She insists that everyone in our community must follow the rules, even those who legally aren't under her jurisdiction. She's the type who'd measure your grass with a ruler and threaten to fine you if it grew an inch too tall. Her favorite weapon wasn't a lawsuit or a lawyer, it was her clipboard. Now, I'm not one to cause trouble. I mostly keep to myself. I mow my lawn, fix my own fences, and help neighbors when I can. A few weeks back, my buddy Paul down the road asked if I could till his backyard so he could start a garden for his wife. Paul's got a bad knee and 2 slipped discs, so I said sure. That's why my 1974 John Deere 4430 was parked next to my driveway. It was covered in dirt. Maybe a little loud when it started up, but it was parked on my land, which I own free and clear. I didn't think twice about it until I saw the bright orange notice on my door. Tractor is an eyesore. HOA violation. Must be removed immediately. And of course, it was signed in that sharp cursive signature. Karen Williams, HOA President. The kicker. She stapled a printed-out copy of the HOA guidelines to the notice, highlighting a section about prohibited vehicles and machinery. I rolled my eyes, tossed the papers in the bin, and went about my day. I figured she'd cool off, maybe realize she overstepped, or maybe someone would remind her, again, that my address doesn't fall under her HOA's authority. But no, that woman's stubbornness was legendary. She once tried to have a neighbor's hummingbird feeder banned because it attracted too much activity. 2 days later, I walked out of my house at sunrise, coffee in one hand, thermos in the other, and the tractor was gone. At first, I thought maybe Paul had come by early and taken it to his place, but he hadn't. I called him, and his voice came through the phone groggy and confused. What do you mean it's gone? Gone, as in vanished. No engine rumble, no warning, just the faint outline of tire tracks in the gravel. That sick, sinking feeling hit me in the gut. You know that moment when something feels off, but you're still not willing to accept it? I had that, but the more I looked around, no notes, no damage, no signs of it breaking down or being stolen by random thieves, the more I realized this wasn't just a coincidence. Karen. I stormed down the block to the HOA office, which doubles as a small shed behind her house. It was locked. I knocked. No answer. I could see movement inside, but she wasn't opening the door. I called her number. It went straight to voicemail. Typical. She loved to enforce rules but hated accountability. I walked the neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen or heard anything. Turns out, one neighbor had noticed a flatbed tow truck around 6 a.m. It backed up to my place and hauled something big away. Another neighbor overheard Karen on the phone the day before, saying she'd had enough of that tractor junking up the neighborhood. That was all I needed. I drove straight to the county sheriff's department with my property survey in hand. Pictures of the tractor parked on my land, and even some drone footage my nephew had taken just the week before. He'd been messing around with his drone for fun, and by pure luck, he captured several clear shots of the tractor's location, showing the fence line and my boundary markers. The deputy at the front desk listened carefully, looked over my paperwork, and then raised an eyebrow. So, she had it towed from your private property? Yes, sir, I said, without permission. He rubbed his chin and called for the sheriff, a man named Dorsey who had a reputation for cutting through nonsense like a hot knife through butter. Dorsey took one look at the drone footage and said, "That sounds like criminal trespass and unauthorized removal of private property." I won't lie, smiled a little. This was finally moving in the right direction. We spent the next couple of hours tracing who towed the tractor and where it was taken. The truck had been privately contracted, not through any city service. Karen had called in a company she knew personally, claiming the equipment was abandoned on communal grounds. The paper trail showed she signed the release herself and paid for storage fees in advance. That was all the sheriff needed. He filed a property recovery order and told me to meet him the next day at the storage yard on the far end of town. At 10 a.m. we rolled into the yard, and there it was, my John Deere, sitting lonely behind a chain-link fence. I could have hugged it. Dorsey flashed his badge, showed the order, and within 15 minutes, the gate opened, and my tractor was being hitched to a flatbed under sheriff's escort. The storage manager grumbled about crazy neighborhood people and not wanting to get involved. I didn't blame him. We made the drive back in quiet. I followed behind in my truck, watching as the tractor bounced gently on the trailer, coming home like a soldier returning from the front lines. But I wasn't prepared for the real show waiting for us, because the moment we turned onto my street, a familiar figure was standing in the yard across from mine, hands on hips, eyes locked on the approaching convoy. Karen. And she was about to have a day she'd never forget. Karen stood on her pristine front lawn like a general defending a fortress, clipboard under one arm, mouth already opening as the sheriff's truck backed down my driveway with my tractor in tow. Her expression twisted into disbelief, then rage. Her manicured hedges trembled from the force of her glare alone. I stepped out of my truck just in time to hear her shriek, "What is going on here?" Sheriff Dorsey didn't flinch. He was a big man with a calm presence that could silence a barking dog. He climbed out of the cab and adjusted his belt before turning to her with a look of tired patience. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said flatly. "Just returning this man's property." Karen stomped across the street like her heels were weapons. "You can't be serious. That thing violates every visual code in the HOA. He can't park it here." Dorsey raised a brow. "You're mistaken. This man's property sits outside the HOA boundary. Your rules don't apply." She held up her clipboard like a holy book. "That's incorrect. He lives in this neighborhood. We all agreed to a standard. The majority voted." He cut her off. "The law isn't decided by neighborhood votes, ma'am. This tractor was unlawfully removed from private property. That's theft." "I suggest you step back," she sputtered. "Are you threatening me?" "No," he replied. "I'm advising you before you add obstruction to the list." I stood beside the trailer, arms crossed, trying to stay calm. I didn't want to gloat, but watching her lose control was like watching a thunderstorm unravel. It was oddly satisfying. Karen's voice pitched up. "I have the right to protect our community. This is our space, and his machinery lowers the value of our homes." Dorsey turned slightly and gestured toward my driveway. "His home, his land, his equipment. You have no authority to remove anything from it." Karen's hand shot out, trembling, pointing at me. "He's doing this just to spite me. He knows what kind of image we're trying to maintain." "I'm just trying to park my tractor," I said, finally joining the conversation. "Same tractor I've had for 12 years, never bothered anyone until now." "That's not true," she snapped. "It's loud, it's dirty, it smells like diesel, Karen." I said, "So does your attitude, but I haven't towed you away yet." Sheriff Dorsey let out a low, quick laugh and coughed to hide it. Karen's mouth dropped open, then snapped shut with a click. Her cheeks flushed so red, I was half worried she'd pass out. "I'm filing a complaint," she barked. "I'll call the HOA board. I'll have your badge." "You're welcome to file whatever paperwork you like," Dorsey replied, unfazed. "But just so we're clear, you unlawfully seized private property, had it transported and stored under your name, and falsely claimed it was abandoned on communal ground. That's a problem. And if this gentleman decides to press charges, you'll have a much bigger one." Karen looked from me to the sheriff and back again, calculating her next move. But the board wasn't here to back her up. Her power, as she liked to think of it, only worked in committee meetings where she could shout down older folks and spin words into threats. Here, under the full light of the law, she was just a very loud woman with a clipboard and, now potentially a criminal, record. She spun on her heel and stormed back to her house. "This isn't over," she shouted. I watched her go, then turned to Dorsey. "Think she'd come back with a lawyer?" "If she's smart," he said, "she'd come back with an apology." We both knew that wasn't likely. The sheriff helped me get the tractor settled back onto my lot. He double-checked the paperwork, made sure I was squared away, and left me with a copy of the recovery order just in case she tried anything again. Once the patrol truck rolled off down the road, something unexpected started happening. My neighbors, the ones who always smiled politely but kept their distance, began walking over one by one. First came Dave, from 2 doors down. He brought a folding chair and a six-pack. Then came Ellie and her twin boys, who petted the tractor like it was a giant green dog. Even Old Man Rivera, who hadn't said more than 2 words to anyone in years, came out and gave me a nod of approval. "About time someone stood up to her," he muttered. Over the next hour, a full-blown block hangout unfolded in my front yard. We weren't partying, but there was a quiet kind of celebration happening. People shared stories about Karen's antics, the times she fined a guy for hanging a US flag a day early, or how she demanded a woman remove a pink flamingo from her garden because it was too whimsical. Turns out, I wasn't the only one she'd overstepped on. I was just the first to push back hard enough. I took a scrap of sheet metal from the garage and etched a message into it with a welding pen. When I was done, I bolted it to the back of the tractor. The plate read, **** seized by HOA Karen. Returned by the law, ****. The laughter that got from my neighbors was worth every second of the mess. By dusk, the crowd had thinned. I sat on my porch with Paul and Dave, watching the sunset paint the sky in orange and lavender. "She'll come at you again, you know," Paul said. "People like that don't back down easy." "Let her," I replied. "This time I'll be ready." Karen didn't show her face for a few days. When she finally did reappear, she stuck to her side of the street. No more notices, no more threats. She'd been reminded, in the most public way possible, that her clipboard wasn't a badge, and her temper wasn't the law. And me, I still fire up that tractor every few days. Not because I need to, but because I can. The sound of that old engine echoing through the neighborhood has become something of a symbol now, not of rebellion, but of standing your ground. And in a world full of Karens with clipboards, sometimes that's all you really need.